Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. Today we will start off with verse 127, and this is the verse from which begin the four questions that have been answered one by one. And according to Ustaz Ghamidi, the surah actually ends on verse 126 with all its content being complete. However, a number of things were raised as questions during the revelation of the surah and regarding the text of the surah. So these were basically four questions, and all these four questions have been successively answered right after verse 126. So the succeeding verses from they actually form an annexure in which God has answered these questions, and as I said, they arose about the directives that are mentioned in the surah while it was being read. Now, the first question has been answered until verse 134. And this was posed by the Muslims who, until then, were slightly weak in fulfilling the responsibilities of faith and morality. And they thought that if they were marrying women for the sake of helping them out and the orphans, then should the condition of justice and meher still be honored or not? The second question was raised by the hypocrites, and it has been answered until verse 152. The third question is in the form of a demand and is posed by the people of the book, and the Quran has answered it until verse 175. Verse 176 is the answer to the fourth and last question, and it relates to those directives of inheritance which were given at the beginning of this surah. So, if you understand this format, you will find out that it is very similar to its counterpart surah, which is Surah al-Maida. Surah Maida also ends with four questions or a few questions that have been answered right at the end, and hence you can also see the close similarity between the two surahs. We have already discussed that the Quran is composed of 7 chapters. Within these 7 chapters, there are surahs that are composed of pairs, they are counterparts to one another. Their affiliation and affinity to one another is very meaningful. At times, something which is concisely stated in one surah is answered or discussed in detail in its counterpart surah. Similarly, at times some premise is proven through an argument based on history in one surah, and in the other surah the same premise would be proven through an argument which is based on, let's say, the signs that are found in human beings, within human beings, and around them. So these are the ways in which these surahs complement one another. And as I just said, as far as Surah Maida and Nisa are concerned, not only there is this meaningful uh, affinity between the two that we have discussed in the beginning, but also the fact the structure is also very similar, with both surahs ending earlier, and then there is a series of questions that are answered right at the end. So, with this, we begin with the text of the surah. It says, وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ قُلِ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِيهِنَّ فَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ فِي يَتَامَى النِّسَاءِ الَّتِي لا تؤتونهن ما كتب لهن وترغبون أن تنكحوهن والمستضعفين من البلدان وأن تقوموا لليتامى بالقسط وما تفعلوا من خير فإن الله كان به عليما. They ask your verdict about women. Tell them God gives his verdict about them to you, and those women whose rights you do not want to fulfill but want to marry them. The directives which are being given about their orphans in this book, about these directives and about other helpless children, also give the verdict. And what is that verdict? Fulfill the rights of women in all circumstances and deal justly with orphans in all circumstances. And remember that any other act of virtue also that you do, you shall definitely get its reward, because it will remain in the knowledge of God. So clearly, you can see that as far as this first part is concerned, it does relate to the fact that as far as Muslims were concerned, they wanted to skip or at least be given concession in the conditions of marrying more than one wife, especially when the purpose was to give uh, support to the orphans and to their mothers. And that is why they thought that, well, because they are not marrying for any other reason except to help them out, why should the condition of justice between all the wives be still honored, and why is it that they would still need to pay the dowry or the meher? And it is being told that no, whatever the reason of your marriage, these two conditions shall still hold. So, if you look at the words, La tu'tunahunna ma kutiba lahunna, that you would not like to give to them what is their right, but you still want to marry them. And also regarding the orphans, so in both of their cases, the Quran says you must deal justly with them, and وَأَن تَقُومُوا لِلْيَتَامَى بِالْقِسْطِ, that you must in all circumstances be fair to the orphans. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِهِ عَلِيمًا. So this means that as far as whatever you do is concerned, don't think that this is something that is not known to God. God has knowledge of all the things that you do, whether they are done in the dark of night, whether something is thought in your own mind and it's not even expressed in words. So He has complete knowledge. Also, you might need to know this, that the Quran has a very peculiar way and a very specific way of stating the questions. The questions are always stated in a very concise way, in a very succinct way. And the nature of the answer will then tell you more details about the question. So the brevity that is found in the question itself, the statement of the question, is given in a very, very concise and brief way. The answer will tell you a lot about the question itself. So that is why we have to understand that as far as these questions are concerned, the real answer to these questions actually comes to us through the fact that we must not in any way think that these questions are complete the way they are cited. In fact, it is the answer, the way the answer is given, that would be something that tells us exactly what the question is. And there are so many examples of this that you might recall. So, for example, earlier on in Surah Baqarah, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. So they ask these questions about the forbidden months. Now, what exactly is the question? The question will become evident later on from the answer itself. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَنْفَالِ. They ask you about the spoils of war. So what do they ask? That is not stated, but the answer will state what exactly was the question. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. They ask you about what to spend. Again, the nature of that spending is just referred to in a very brief way. So this is a style that you have to get used to as students of the Quran, that the way these questions are cited at times, or in most cases, they are stated in a very precise way, in a very concise way. Also, you might need to note this, that these questions might not always be raised by people. So they might be even in the minds of people. So because God knows that these questions have arisen, but people have not expressed them, so those questions are still entertained. And yes, at times it does happen that as far as the questions are concerned, they might be expressly stated, and hence they are to be understood as well. Also, you would like to know that as far as the expression is concerned, which says La tu'tunahunna ma kutiba lahunna. So if you have a slight understanding of the Quranic Arabic, you'll come to know that there is nothing in the discourse which can form the coordinate clause, which is called the matuf alayh, slightly technical word, of antaqumu. If you look at the second last line, it says antaqumu. So it has to be suppressed, and this suppression has to be understood from the context. So the words which occur before wa antaqumu would be to the effect, give dowers to these women. So just as it is said that you have to treat these orphans with justice, similarly, because dowers is already mentioned earlier on in Surah al-Nisa that you have to pay them, the Quran has made it a point to say that not only you have to deal with these orphans with justice, but you have to deal with these women with justice also, and their dowers must be paid and they must be treated equally. So this is what is understood, and therefore we have to understand that this brevity of Quranic Arabic is something that is a very, very clear hallmark of its style. And if we are able to understand it, we will be able to also understand how beautifully the Quran omits words which are not essential, and they are understood to be present in the mind of the reader. وَإِذِ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنْفُسُ الشُّحَّ وَإِنْ تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. Indeed, If a woman fears revulsion or neglect on her husband's part, there is no sin on them if they strike a compromise between themselves, because compromise is better. And you well know that greed is found in the nature of people. But if you deal kindly and practice self restraint, you shall be rewarded, because God knows all that you do. Now, here, if you look at the word nushuz, so this actually is something when it emanates from the wife. We have discussed this earlier on in the surah also, that when a wife becomes rebellious in the sense that she challenges the authority of the husband, in the sense that she does not regard him to be the head of the family, the way structurally it has been proposed, then of course there are certain measures which the Quran suggests the husband to adopt. However, when the word nushuz actually relates to the husband, then it means that he refuses to deal with his wife in spite of regarding her to be his wife. He refuses to deal with his wife in the way that he should do so, with affection and with kindness. So, in such a case, it is said, women are counseled that if they fear that their husbands may show indifference to them or even think of parting ways with them because of their insistence to be treated equally, it is all right if a husband and wife settle for a compromise. So, because the context here is that that husbands or men, they are marrying not for any other reason but for the sake of supporting women. So the Quran has said that if this is the case, that in spite of being told that they must treat their wives equally, but let's say it doesn't happen for any reason, so women are counseled that if they fear that they would be left high and dry, and they might even get separated from their husbands, or who might divorce them and think of parting ways with them. So, and the reason being that they would like to insist to be treated equally. So God says that if this is the case, then it is all right if a husband and a wife, they settle for a compromise. So this means that a wife can show or be lenient to husband in her demand for justice, as well as the payment of dower and maintenance to her, in order to dispense with this hovering fear of separation. So both these things, of course, dower, which is has to be given at all cost, and equal treatment of the wives, they are her right. But being on the receiving end, the Quran says that, well, if she thinks that by foregoing these rights she'll still be supported by her husband and she'll remain in wedlock, then it's like a compromise if she settles for that. And the verse goes on to say that in compromises and settlements rests the welfare of all, because it is the interest of both husband and wife that this relationship, once it is established, should continue forever as far as possible, even if a lot of sacrifice has to be made to keep it intact. And this actually shows that it should not be very easy to break the marriage bond, because the Quran says that even if what is one's right, if that is not given, and a wife still wants to strike compromise just to save the family, then this is something which is worthy of undertaking. So, continuing with the words of counsel, the verse says that greed is an evil which is found in human beings, that affects mutual relationships. The remedy for this malady or this ailment is that either both should get ready to make some sacrifice, or if one of them is ill enough, by not being willing to do so, the other should take the initiative. Hence, the wife has to make some sacrifice to keep the family unit intact, if this is the case. And if she does so, it is better. In the end, if you look at the words, they say, but if you do good and practice self-restraint, if you do good and practice self-restraint, which actually means that they urge the husband to adopt the way of sacrifice and selflessness. They actually urge him that it is only befitting that he show magnanimity and piety in this regard. And that is why it is said that yes, a woman can strike this compromise by foregoing her right of equal treatment and justice, but equally, a man or the husband should be magnanimous and selfless in this regard. He should live up to his traditions of grit and character, and he should be someone who actually foregoes this situation. The Quranic words وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحَّ are very pertinent to be understood as well. The translation of these words is that greed is found in the nature of people. So greed or stinginess, I mean, both are the same facets. I mean, they are two facets of the same trait. So the first of these meanings implies, and if we translate the word shuha as stinginess, it implies that a person is miserly in fulfilling the rights of others. This trait is condemnable in all circumstances, and greed can relate to a desire for a noble thing as well as for an evil one. So, if it is translated as greed, then it could be of both sorts. It can be within bounds and it could be out of bounds. The fact that whether it is good or evil is an additional thing. As per its positive aspect, it does occupy a status in human nature. So most people are so overwhelmed by it that it becomes a melody, and that is why the Quranic words وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحْ refer to this very aspect of greed, that instead of striking a compromise, at times either stinginess or greediness, they get the better of people, and then they don't realize what has gone down. And also, we have to understand that these verses, which state the requirement of justice between wives, does not actually mean justice regarding the inner inclination or external behavior. Now, how do we say this? This is actually borne out by the very next verse, which is the one that we're now going to study. It says, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ وَإِن تُصْلِحُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا وَإِن يَتَفَرَّقَا يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِّن سَعَتِهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ وَاسِعًا حَكِيمًا. And even if it is your desire, you shall never be able to totally be just between wives. So it is enough if you do not completely incline yourself to one altogether, so as to leave the other dangling. Indeed, if you keep reforming yourselves and keep fearing God, God is most forgiving, ever merciful. And if the husband and wife part, God shall provide abundance for each from his bounty. God is extremely bountiful and very wise. So if you look at this verse, وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ, and the very next verse which says that do not incline yourself to one wife, they actually say that don't think that the justice that is a requirement between the wives is something in which the inner inclination or your love or your attachment to all the wives has to be the same. This is not what is the requirement. Your inner inclination, your proclivity towards a particular wife is something that can always happen. This is a matter of your heart, and a person can love one wife more than the others. But what actually it means is that justice is not required in loving them equally. It is required in the rights that a husband is responsible for. For example, the allowance that he would give the wife should be equal, or the maintenance, besides the maintenance, the residence that he provides the wife should have more than one wife should have the same setting. And so it is to be understood that it is humanly impossible to be just in this matter, because one has no power on one's heart, on one's feelings. Therefore, this misconception has been removed, that justice does not mean justice in equal loving. It does not mean that you have to have an equal affection and love for all the wives. The Quran requires a husband to not completely lean towards one of the wives and show indifference to the other as if she had no husband. So the husband is asked to show balance in his behavior towards them and in fulfilling their rights. In case of any fault or blemish in this matter, he should at once try to reform the situation and make amends and keep fearing the Almighty, because as the word says, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. If this happens, then God is someone who is forgiving and who is merciful. So this is what we have to understand, that everything must be done to save the family from breaking away, from dismemberment, and that is what God wants. And if nothing is working, then the Quran says, وَإِن يَتَفَرَّقَا يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِّن سَعَتِهِ. And if the husband and the wife part, God shall provide abundance for each from his bounty. It is God who provides sustenance to his creatures and assists them in hardship. He will help both of them. So, if everything has failed and there is no way out, it does not mean that both husband and wife have to live in misery. They can untie the marriage knot, and both have an equal right to untie the marriage knot. We have already discussed this in Surah al-Baqarah, where detailed directives regarding divorce have been given. Men and women both, or husbands and wife, have an equal right to divorce. The only difference is that a man directly divorces the wife, and the woman, in her case, when she wants a divorce, she asks for her husband to give a divorce, and then it becomes imperative on him to not to I mean, in all circumstances, comply, unless, of course, a balance or a reconciliation can be struck. So, as far as these relationships are concerned, it must be understood that it's not, I mean, something which has come into existence with the consent of the husband and wife, with the families. It's like a marriage between families. It should not become a very easy affair to dissolve a family merely because of differences that can be resolved. Yes, at times you have to make a lot of sacrifices, but the Quran wants us to make these sacrifices to keep the marriage intact as much as possible. وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَقَدْ وَصَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ أَنِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَإِنْ تَكْفُرُوا فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَنِيًّا حَمِيدًا. These are the directives of God. If you do not accept them, you will only harm yourself, because to God belongs all that is in the heavens and the earth. To those whom we had given the book before you, we also gave them the same directive. And to you too, we are giving the same directive. And what is that directive? Keep fearing God, and remember that if you do not believe, you will cause no harm to God, because whatever is in the heavens and the earth belongs to God, and God is self sufficient, worthy of praise. So these lines are meant to remind people that if they honor the word of God, if they honor the directives of God, it is only in their own interest. And if they do not do so, God is self-sufficient. You're not going to harm God in any way. You're not going to take away anything from God. It's the people themselves who will suffer. And so therefore the counsel of God is something that they should pay heed to. And that is why it is repeated again, and it is said, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. And Ustaz, bearing this repetition in mind, has therefore said so in the translation as well. Listen once again. To God belongs all that is in the heavens and the earth, and sufficient is God to trust, which means that God has to be trusted in all these circumstances, and no way should a person lose hope in God. إن يشاء يذهبكم أيها الناس ويأتي بآخرين وكان الله على ذلك قديرا من كان يريد ثواب الدنيا فعند الله ثواب الدنيا والآخرة وكان الله سميعا بصيرا. So for for this reason, this is only he who deserves to be consigned all affairs of life. In case of your disobedience, if he wants, O people, he can destroy all of you and bring others in your place. God has all the power to do this. And this is something that has been mentioned elsewhere also in the Quran, that don't think that people have been created as indispensable. If God wants, he can destroy and bring a whole new people, a whole new lot in their places. So it is they who must understand that they are not indispensable, they can be destroyed, and in such circumstances it's very easy for God to bring another generation or another set of people in their place. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ قَدِيرًا. This is something which is not a problem at all from God. And then this warning is sounded of man kana yuridu sawab ad-dunya fa inda Allahi sawab ad-dunya wal akhirah. So he who wants the reward of this world, it lies with God also, and he who also wants the reward of the next world, then with God lies the reward of this world and of the next. So remember, if you want the reward of this world, you'll only get the reward of this world. But if you want the reward of the next world, then fa inda Allahi sawab ad-dunya wal akhirah, then you'll get the reward of both worlds. God is not entrusted to reward you in the hereafter if you don't have any interest to get that reward. Remember, this is what is being said. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. And God hears all and he sees all. So therefore we have to understand that as far as the Quran is concerned, he is totally stated this in a very, very fundamental way, that as far as as far as the opportunity to gain reward is concerned, that is plentifully found in this world. But if a person does not believe in the hereafter and expects no reward in the hereafter because he doesn't believe that there's going to be an hereafter, so God is not interested in rewarding such a person. So in such a case, whatever good he does, he will get its reward in this world, because God is just and he will not deny that reward to a person. Of course, denying that reward in the hereafter is also a requisite of justice, because the person himself never believed in the hereafter. How can he expect to be rewarded in the hereafter then? Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada lillahi walau ala anfusikum. So from here begins the second question, or the answer to the second question. Remember, the first question related to the payment of the dower and to the payment and to the treatment of justice between wives. And the Quran has answered this question in a very strong way, and has said that these weak Muslims, they think that as far as the Quran is concerned, because it's like showing favor to orphans and to widows, that is, these marriages are being conducted. So maybe they can do away with this condition of justice and paying the dawah. The Quran says nothing doing. This is a right of women. Whatever the reason of your marriage, regardless of whether you are showing this favor or not, you must pay them their dawah, because this is their right. You have to give them their maintenance the way it should be given. And you cannot in any way be unjust or treat your wives differently. Yes, as far as your inner inclination is concerned, that is something that can be different, but not as far as your outward treatment is concerned. So we'll inshallah take up the second question in our next session, and we will now attempt our literal and idiomatic translation. But before we do that, if you have any questions regarding what we have studied until verse 134, please raise them.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. If anybody has any questions, this is the time to raise it. I don't see any hands right now, Dr. Saleem, so I'll ask you a question. Um, so, as far as where does khula come into it then? Then, if the husband, if the wife has to ask for divorce from the husband, what is the nature of khula then? Can women not ask for do
So you see,
divorce
the word
themselves?
khula is not used in the Quran at any instance. This is a term of our jurisprudence. Our jurists have coined this term, and they think that because of the fact that the dissolution of marriage, when a woman would require that dissolution is not mentioned in the Quran per se explicitly, so they have coined this term. So, in our understanding, this is not required at all, because the Quran says that the marriage knot is tied with the consent of both. So, if both have the consent to tie the marriage knot, it is but common sense that both should have the same right in untying it equally. So the only difference is that because a husband is the head of the family, the procedure that is outlined for that is that he has to give pronounce a divorce, and then that divorce will take place after the iddat period has passed. However, if it is the woman who would like to get divorced, then she cannot directly divorce the husband. She'll ask the husband to give her divorce. So in both cases, the initiator of divorce would be the husband. In the first case, out of his own will. In the second case, on the demand of the wife. So that the procedure is the same. So this is what the Quran tells us, and in both cases there will be no difference of any procedure. It is just that a man can directly give divorce, and a woman will demand divorce. After which, if some legislation is done, it can be made binding on the husband. That, let's say, for example, 90 days or 70 days or whatever the amount of days, that after this time, if there is no reconciliation, then he has to honor the wish of the wife if she would like to get separated, because something that has come into being with the consent of both can be dissolved by either of them, and it cannot be something that only a husband has the right to.
Okay. Then I have another question, Dr. Saleem. Uh, this one asks, the inclination to one's wife is natural and automatic, even if one strives hard not to do so. How
Mhm.
about the same when it comes to children? Um, is the
That is
natural.
fine. I mean, so remember, the Quran is not discussing equal treatment or justice between children. I mean, it's not something like that. But of course, taking cue from that, we have to understand that as far as the matter of rights is concerned, you should grant the same rights to all your children. I mean, however, this is always a possibility that a mother or a father can love one child more than the other. I mean, because this is something that is a thing that you cannot have any control on your own self. It's like a thing that naturally happens. But this must not be expressed in a way that undermines the other person in any way, especially if that feeling of deprivation arises, because that's going to be counterproductive. In such cases, at least it should be the situation that the outward behavior should be, in a way that there is no injustice in discharging their rights. I mean, this is not
Okay.
discussed directly in the Quran, but taking cue from the treatment between just treatment from between the wives. Obviously, this should be done on the same lines as well.
Okay. So when they talk about justice between the wives, is it what if you spend a little? The question continues. What if you spend more time with one wife? Does that make a difference? If there's a
I mean, you see, again, it means that all the apparent rights, like for example, time, uh, similarly the place that you give the wives, similarly the amount of maintenance that you give, they all have to be equal, unless, of course, it is agreed upon between the wives that there is a situation that has arisen in which maybe the need of a wife is more. For example, she might be sick, she might be having some temporary issues. So this is like then a mutual adjustment between the wives, and of course this would not require any equality, because now we have a special situation. So the Quran is not talking about these special situations, it's talking about normal situations. In normal situations, it should not be the case that you, I mean, incline more with one wife by giving her more time, by giving her a better place of residence, or by maybe giving her a more allowance, some more allowance than the rest.
okay. Then there's a question, Dr. Salim, what is the reason for using the word? I think it's was in the verse we have just studied. This is used usually for those who have passed away, but in these verses, the addresses are living persons.
What exactly is the word?
I think it's a wow swad. I can't really read it. Mariam, can you clarify what the word is, maybe?
Wasa or wasa is this
Vasa.
one. It's like
Vas, yeah, vas. I hear is vasa. I see it.
like
Which
wasiya.
which verse is it? What exactly is the verse number?
Yeah, that's what I've asked them if they can give me a specific number so that way I can let you know. It says vas or vasa, vasi. I'm still
Which
waiting on that,
can you?
Dr. Salim.
Okay.
So, in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, if you can just clarify, Mariam, otherwise we'll come back to this question maybe after when we pause the next time. Maybe just continue, Dr. Salim, and if she gives me a specific, I'll ask you in the next pause.
Okay.
Dr.
So
Salim,
I'm
I
now
think
going
she's
to.
asking walakad wasayna al-insana.
Where is that?
That is ayah number 131. Walillahi fis samawati wa fil ard walakad wasayna al-insana walakad wasayna alladhina utul
So this
kitaba
is
min
just mean
qablikum.
it just means to counsel someone. So
Yeah.
wassa, when it is used in this sense, it only means that we make this will known to those people, or we make our will known to those people. So it's like telling them that we are informing you. So the word wassa, and from the word wasiya, that's the same word. Wasiya is also something that relates to informing someone of your inheritance, or maybe telling them that the amount of money that you would like to give them when you pass away. So the word wasiya is a noun, and wassa here is a verb. But the verb here is used in the sense that it is an advice given to them. So because that wasiyat is also like an advice given, that, and that of course is binding. So the noun is made from the same verb. So the verb and the noun are the same, but technically when the word wasiya is used, it actually refers to the fact that you are now making a will in favor of someone, which will be implemented once you pass away. And here what is meant is that walakad wasaina, it's just the verb. The verb says that we are informing them, or we have informed them. So, I mean, it's just a question of a verb and a noun.
Okay, then we have another question. Are wives permitted to disallow husband from having another wife?
They are not. I mean, why should that happen? Of course, they have the option of not carrying on as a wife if they think that the husband is insisting. And also, I would think that it is in line with wisdom that the husband should discuss this matter with the wife, with the first wife that he intends to marry the second one, because he might end up breaking the first marriage at all costs. So, is he prepared to do that? So, I think it's always a wise thing, if you have to marry again, to take your first wife in confidence and seek her consent. It's not a binding thing, but I mean, I think it's something which is a wiser thing in today's world, because if you marry a second wife and you lose your first one, either you should be prepared for that, or if you're not prepared for that, then why should you go and undertake this whole adventure, I would say, without discussing it with your first wife? And also, very important, remember, are the children from the first wife. Their consent, or their tacit consent, also is important, because if they don't approve of it, yes, technically you might still have the right to marry, but what will happen? what will happen is that you will not only lose your first wife, but also the children from that first wife. They might also turn against you.
So basically, Dr. Salim, what I'm understanding is that the husband doesn't need to seek advice. It's the wife's choice then. She can leave or she can stay. In
I
that
mean,
case, can she ask for
see,
khula?
what I'm saying is that if the husband also, I think, although it's not mentioned in explicit words, who is such a husband that who would like to break the first marriage at the cost of the second one? I mean, every husband who is going to undertake this marriage, a second marriage, should know that it could affect the first marriage. So,
So then,
if that is the case, then why wouldn't he not consult the first wife and their children?
but then it seems, Dr. Salim, it's more of a social binding than the religion itself doesn't bind the man in
I
any
mean,
way.
there are a number of things on which the religion does not bind. For example, cousin marriages are allowed, but if they are going to produce children who are defective because of mutations, it's our common sense that we should not do it. So remember, religion leaves a lot of things to our own common sense and practice. I mean, in general, it says you can marry your cousins, and it's a general allowance. It makes this allowance in consideration of the fact that normally cousin marriages are fine, but if they have started to produce children who are handicapped, then of course something has to be done. Similarly, in normal circumstances, the Quran would expect that, well, if the second marriage is being conducted, then this would be in all I mean, with all intents and purposes, something that is known and declared. And when this is known and declared, how can the first wife not know that this is being done? And if it is still being done, then it only means that it has her tacit approval. So you see, the Quran at times does not give you these things in words, but automatically it tells you when you're doing something and it's going to harm you, then you should abstain from doing that.
Right. Shabnam, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
थैंक यू सर ये अभी आपने कल्चरल नॉर्म्स का जिक्र किया सर ये अरब नॉन अरब कल्चर्स में लाइक आर कंट्री तो हमारे जब शादी की जाती है इट इज अंडरस्टूड कि वो लाइफ लॉन्ग उनका ये एक पैक्ट है कि वो एक ही शादी करेगा तो सर कुरान में इस चीज को डिस्कस नहीं किया लेकिन सर ये एक पैक्ट तो है तो फिर या तो ये फिर दिस इज नॉट फेयर कि अगर या तो वो पहले ही क्योंकि हमारी कल्चरल नॉर्म्स हैं और हमारी सोसाइटी में लोग बच्चियां एक्सेप्ट नहीं करती कि वो खामन दूसरी शादी करेगा तो या तो वो अनाउंस कर दे उस वक्त कि हो सकता है मैं दूसरी शादी कर लूं तो ही शुड मेक एन अनाउंस मतलब ही शुड मेक इट क्लियर तो लड़की को कबूल होगा तो वो कर लेगी नहीं कबूल होगा तो वो नहीं करेगी तो
I
सर
mean,
ये
as I said, this is what should be done. I mean, this is something it's common sense, and people should not damage or in any way hinder a relationship with the first family. You have children, you have a family already made. So that is why you see what happens generally is that people don't disclose the second marriage to the first wife, and they do so by at times conducting a secret marriage, which itself is a wrong thing. So they would typically marry another woman, maybe in a different city or even in a different country, without disclosing that they have another spouse to the first spouse, because they know that if they disclose this, then it would, I mean, the first wife would not accept it. So I think what has to be understood here is that if you have to marry, then it is in the fitness of things that this should be discussed with the first wife and the children. And I mean, a person should go ahead only if he has the consent. Because if he goes ahead and he does not have the consent, then he would have to bear with this situation that the first wife might leave or the children might turn against him. Is he willing to, or is he prepared to accept this situation? I don't think any wise person would be, unless, of course, there is some exceptional reason.
राइट सर सर आपको लगता है कि इतने वाइज पीपल हमारी सोसाइटी में एग्जिस्ट करते हैं
So you see, it's not a question. It's not a question of people being wise or not. It's a question of what the Quran is telling us to do. Wisdom is something that a person learns from his mistakes also, and at the same time from the mistakes of others also. So, I mean, it's not something new today that we are for the first time discussing a second marriage. This is a age-old practice, and we know how families get destroyed. So, if the person does not have the wisdom to save his family, I mean, how can we teach that wisdom if he or she sees from his own eyes that this is going to be the outcome? Because this is the outcome normally that we witness in the case of second marriages.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Salim, it seems very arbitrary though. It seems, I don't know. Anyway, no more raised hands at this time. You may continue, Dr. Salim. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll start off with the literal and idiomatic translation. Again, just a reminder that this literal and idiomatic translation is a very important part of our study of the Quran, because it makes you go closer to the text of the Quran. In the first instance, the reading or the discussion is more on the explanation, and the literal words are not directly taken into account. But this second reading, in which we take the words into account, is meant to bring you closer to the text and closer to the Arabic of the Quran. And if you are able to note down these vocabulary, this vocabulary that you come across, and keep noting it down, then you'll realize that very soon these words keep on repeating. And if you're just able to know the vocabulary, you can make a very good sense of the Quranic verse that you're studying without even knowing Arabic. So that is the purpose of this literal and idiomatic translation. So I do expect and urge all of you at the same time that please note down the vocabulary and make a diary, or on your computers or whatever, or on cell phones, so that you have a list of these words, and the nature of the construction also shall become evident to you. And if you do so, and also keep revising this vocabulary, as I said, it will become very easy for you to follow the Quran without even knowing Quranic Arabic. So it starts off, وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ wa, and يَسْتَفْتُونَكَ, they ask you. They ask you. And they, of course, not being mentioned here, or referring to weak Muslims who wanted to marry but did not want to show justice and give dowries to their wives. So now the words are fi, about, an-nisa, women. So obviously, وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاء would mean they ask you about women. Now, it is very clear when you read the next verses that what is being said is that they ask you about the wives which they intend to marry, or women that they intend to marry, and would not like to give them dowers or treat them justly, because they think that they are doing a favor by marrying widows and orphans just to support them. Now comes the verdict of God. Kul, say, Allah, God. So this is what Gabriel is telling the Prophet to communicate to these people. Allahu yuftikum fil kalala. God yuftikum, gives his verdict to you. Fihinna, about them. Wa, and ma yutla alaykum, and those women that have been mentioned in the book. Yutla alaykum fil kitab, that have been mentioned to you, or that have been read out to you in the book. Fi yataman nisa, about the women of the orphans. And who are those? Allati, those who, la, not, tunahunna, you would not like to give them, ma, that, kotiba lahunna, has been written for them, of course referring to the dower. Wa, and targhabuna, you very much like, an, that, tankihuhunna, that you marry them. So about them, God gives his verdict. And wal mustazafin, and the weak, minal wildan, among the children. Wa, and an, that, taqumu lil yatama bil qist, that you stand by justice with the orphans. Lil yatama, alhamdulillah, excuse me. So an taqumu lil yatama bil qist would be that you must stand by justice regarding the orphans. Wa, and ma, what, taf'alu, you do, min khairin, from good. So whatever good you do, fa inna Allah kana bihi alima, fa, therefore, inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is, bihi, about it, alima, knowledgeable. So whatever good you do, God is knowledgeable about it, God knows full well about it. Wa, and, in, if, imra'atun, and if a woman, imra'atun, woman. Wa in imra'atun would mean, and if a woman, khafat, fears, mim ba'liha, from her husband. Ba'al means husband. Ha, her husband. So if a wife fears from her husband, nushuzan. Nushuzan means revulsion. Revulsion means, of course, that you are no longer interested in your wife. Aw, or i'razan, neglect, indifference. I mean, they are very close words. So if a woman fears that her husband would show revulsion or indifference, fa, therefore, la, not, junaha, sin, alayhima, upon both of them, referring to both the husband and wife, an, that, yusliha, they make a peace, they make a treaty, they strike a compromise, bainahuma, between themselves, sulha, of reconciliation. So they strike a compromise of reconciliation about them. So, in other words, what is being said here is that if a woman fears that her husband will show revulsion and indifference, then it is not any sort of sin upon both of them if they strike a compromise in the form of a reconciliation. And then it is said, "Wasulhu khair," and compromise, khair, is better, and compromise is better. Wa, and uhdirat. So uhdirat is, it is something which is found, al anfus, in souls, shuhha, greed. So greed is something which is found in the souls, or greed is something that is found in the nature of people. So uhdira, found, an nafs, in the souls, shuh, greed, wa, and, in, if, tuhsinu. So tuhsinu means you deal kindly, wa, and, tattaku, you express or practice discipline, fa, therefore, inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is, bima, about, ta'maluna, what you do, khabira, knowledgeable. So if you show kindness, and if you show self constraint or self restraint, then indeed God is knowledgeable about what you do. He is khabir, He is aware of what you do. Ta'malun, what you do. Wa, and, lan, certainly not. Tastati'u, possible for you. And certainly not is possible for you, an, that. Ta'dilu, you deal justly. Baina, between. An nisa, women. So we have just seen that this verse is not referring to the justice, that is equality regarding the heart. It's referring to the fact that if you would like to love your wives equally, then this is something that is not even possible. And that is why the Quranic words are walau harastum. Walau harastum, however much you might attempt it. You can never be, you can never treat your wife justly as far as your inner inclination is concerned. Although the word inner inclination is not mentioned in Quranic words, but it is evident from the very next words, فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ, that the justice that is being discussed here is not justice between the time and allowance and maintenance, but justice between having equal feelings for all the wives. So the Quran says that even if you want, you cannot be just to your wives however you much want it, regarding treating them in the same way regarding affection or love. That is not possible. Fa, therefore, la, not. Tamilu, incline. You incline. Kullal maili, totally. So do not incline yourself totally. Fa, therefore, tazaruha, you leave her. Kal muallaka, as if she is dangling, as if she is neither here nor there. So you're aligning yourself to one wife so much that the other is totally left high and dry. She is left dangling. Kal muallaka, as if she is dangling, as if she is nowhere. Wa, and, in, if. Tuslihu. Tuslihu means that if you set right. Wa, and, tattaqu, fear. If you set right and fear God, fa, therefore, inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is, ghafuran, merciful, rahima, compassionate. So if you set right the affairs and fear, then indeed God is forgiving and merciful. Wa, and, in, if. Yatafarraqa, both decide to separate. Yatafarraqa, both decide to separate. Yughnillahu, God will make them rich. God will provide them with richness, or provide them with abundance. Kullan, each of them. Min sa'atihi, from his own self, from his own grace, from his own bounty. Wa, and, kana, is, Allah, God, wasi'an, very bountiful, hakima, very wise. And God is very bountiful and very wise. So in what is being said here is that if both want to separate, both want to separate, Yughnillahu kullan. God will make ghani each of them. God will make rich each of them. Min from sa'atihi, his own grace. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ وَاسِعًا حَكِيمًا. And God indeed is very bountiful and very wise. وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَقَدْ وَصَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُم. So wa and lillahi, to God, ma, that, fi, in, as-samawat, the heavens, wa, and, ma, that, fi, in, al-ard, the land. So literally it would mean to God is that which is between the heavens and between the earth. In other words, what is being said is that all that is in the heavens and the earth is for God. It belongs to God. Wa and laqad, indeed, wassayna, we advise. What do we advise? Allazina, to those, utul kitaba, were given the book. So indeed we advise to those who were given the book, min qablikum, before you, referring to the Israelites. So who were given the book before you? Of course, referring to the book which is Torah. It's being said that to those whom we had given the book before you, we also advised them. What was our advice? Not only to them, but to you also. So wa iyyakum would mean to you. So if I do it again, it would be like this: that if walaqad, indeed, wasaina, we advised, allazina utul kitab, who were given the book, min qablikum, before you, and wa iyyakum, to you too. So we give this advice to those who were given the book before you, and we give the same advice to you too. And what is that advice? An is that ittaqullah, fear God. So both are being given the same advice, that fear God. And remember, this is something that we've already discussed. Fearing God actually means fearing His anger. And His anger is not something of a personal nature. He gets angry when we do something which is against our own interests. So ittaqullah means that we fear His anger, that He might get angry, and His anger, as I said, is not a personal one. It is because we will be doing something that's going to ruin ourselves. Wa and in, if takfuru, you deny. Wa in takfuru, and if you deny. Fa inna, fa, therefore, inna, indeed, lillahi, to God, ma, that, fis samawat, in the heavens, wa, and ma, that, fi, in, al ard, the land. So if you deny, then it doesn't matter, because to God belongs whatever is in the heaven and the earth. And if you look at the previous if you look at the previous verse, also it starts off with the same words, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. And here it says, فَإِنَّا لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that whatever is in the heavens and the earth, it belongs to Him. Wa, and kana, is Allah, God, ghaniyan, self-sufficient. So لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. Wa, and lillah, to God, ma, that, fi, in, as-samawat, the heavens. So samawat, as we know, is the plural of sama. Sama is heaven, and samawat is its plural, heavens, or the skies. And to God belongs what is in the skies and what is in the earth. So if you note, you'll find this repetition thrice. Earlier on, if you look at the first line, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And then if you look at the third line, Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. And then if you look again at the fourth or the fifth line, it says Walillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. So it's like a triple stress and triple emphasis being sounded out, that don't think that if you do something which is against the directive of God, it's going to harm God in any way or lessen anything from the treasure of God, because whatever is in the heaven and the earth belongs to God. He is self-sufficient. He is someone who knows what he's doing. And wakafa billahi wakila would mean wa and kafa, sufficient. Billahi, about God. Wakila, trust. So sufficient is God to trust. He does not, we don't require anyone else if we trust God. In is if. Yasha, wants. So if He wants, yuzhibkum, He will take you away. Ayyuhan nas, O people. Wa, and ya'ti bi akharin, bring another set of people. So what he is saying is that if he wants, he will take you away, O people. He will take you away, O people, وَيَأْتِ بِآخَرِينَ, and he will bring a new set of people in your place. Wa and Kana Allah, Kana is God, Allah, Allah on Zalika, this Kadira, powerful. So God is powerful on this. In other words, God has the authority or the ability or the power to bring other people in your place. Allah Zalika, regarding this, God is capable of doing this. Man kana yurid du sawab dunya. Man kana, he who wants yuridu. In other words, we can translate this as man, he, kana is yuridu, wants sawab dunya, the sawab of this dunya, the reward of this dunya. Then there is a suppression here, which shows that he will get it. And man kana yuridu sawab al akhirah is also suppressed here, and he who would like the reward of the akhirah, فَإِنَّ اللَّهِ ثَوَابَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, then with God is the sawab of this dunya, the reward of this dunya, and of this, and of the akhirah, and of the hereafter. So in other words, what is being said here is that people who would like the reward of this world only, then they will get it, that reward lies with God. But people who would like the reward of the next world, then God will, with God lies the reward of this world and also the next world for such people. Wa and Kana is Allah, God, Sami'an, listener, Basira, who has sight. And God is someone who listens all and who sees all, which means that every single thing is in His knowledge and there is nothing that He is not aware of. So we will end our session here, and we can take questions regarding what we have studied. And once they're finished, we can also take off-topic questions.
So, Dr. Saleem, it seems to be that I think everybody has a question regarding a lot of comments and questions regarding, multiple marriages. So, there's one comment it says, and then there's a question that follows. It's very
Mhm.
rare that a wife actually breaks a marriage because of the husband having another wife. What are the rights of each wife? Do they actually have to have separate houses, or can you house them under the same roof?
So basically, this is something of a responsibility which is situational. I mean, obviously, if you're going to marry more than one wife, then this is something that is to be known beforehand, and that would mean that whatever provision that you're making for her or more than one wife is to be told to her before that marriage takes place. The problem with our situations and marriages are that all these things are decided once the marriages have taken place. So the proper way would be that whatever provision that you can afford in your means, you will state them that, well, I can provide you with a separate residence, or if I intend to marry a second wife, then I will give her a separate maintenance, a separate residence. Or if I am not able to do so, then my situation demands that I'll give you both an equal number of rooms, maybe in the same house, under the same roof. So whatever is to be done, that will be discussed before the marriage is going to take place. So that is the way to go about doing these things. If a husband is already married, and he never had plans to marry again, but now because of for some reason he now has the plans to marry again, so this would be again discussed with the second wife, that this is how the situation is, and she would either be living with the first wife, or if the means of the husband are such that he can provide her with another house, and of course they will be discussed, and things will then proceed. So everything is open ended, and it has been left to your mutual discussion and mutual consent.
Okay, then we have another comment. It looks unfair to women about men marrying without permission. Think about the Arab culture where frequent divorces and women left without support. Now, this is more of a comment, but Dr. Salim, it seems, I have a question, it seems so arbitrary. The Quran itself actually allows it, so it's left to the discretion of uh, people themselves. And if a man says that I have done everything correctly, I have been fair, and he still decides to bring a wife, what about the first wife? It seems
I mean,
so arbitrary. The
it's
wisdom.
not that arbitrary. I mean, it might sound arbitrary. Otherwise, you see, if the wife does not wish to continue, she can always back away from the marriage. I mean, even if she doesn't marry and there is some domestic reason because of which she does not like to continue. So remember, first we have to understand that separation is a right which each of the two have, regardless, and they have an equal right to it. Anyone can walk out. It's not just that the husband can walk out. Unfortunately, what has happened is that the laws that have been made as a result, in most Muslim countries, they do not properly provide that justice to the wife in which she has an equal right to walk out. And she has to undergo a lot of pains and a lot of unwarranted procedure to get a divorce in many Muslim countries. Otherwise, if you follow what the Quran has said, I mean, it is absolutely clear that both have the same right. Both, I mean, the Quran urges that as far as possible they should try to abide by the marriage. But if something is not working and they are living in misery, then both have an equal right to walk away. So I think if you are able to make sense of this word, that both have an equal right, and if any one of them is acting in a bad way and doing some high-handedness, maybe doing something which is harming the interest of the other spouse, I mean, the first thing would be that discussion would be conducted between the spouses, and the family members would be involved. But say if either the wife or the husband insists on something which is not the right thing to do, then we have no choice but the fact that the other party would withdraw from the contract. You see, there is no other way to continue. The marriage came into existence with the consent of the two, and if any of the consent and any of the two does not show that consent anymore, then I mean, you cannot force them to remain married. So remember, this is a right which both have.
Right. Um, okay, Dr. Saleem. Anybody, any questions? Okay, Sumbul, you have a question. I hope it's regarding the passage right now. I haven't opened the forum yet. Please go ahead, unmute your mic and ask your question.
हाँ अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब, मैंने ये सुना हुआ है, आई एम नॉट श्योर कि सही है कि नहीं, कि जो हजूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की एक कज़न थी जिनसे उनकी शादी हुई थी, वो अपने हस्बैंड को इसलिए पसंद नहीं करती थी बिकॉज वो उनके स्टेटस के नहीं थे। और एक और मैंने सुना था कि एक दफ़ा एक खातून आई थी हजूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के पास, एंड शी सेड कि आई डोंट वांट टू बी नाशुक्री पर्सन, कि मुझे अपने हस्बैंड पसंद नहीं है तो आई वांट टू बी सेपरेटेड। तो ये दोनों ठीक है?
Both are correct.
Okay.
I mean, as far as the first incident is concerned, it is about Zayd ibn Harisa, who was the adopted son of the
जी
Prophet, who himself was a slave earlier on, but he was liberated. And the Prophet wanted to raise his status, and therefore he got him married to Zainab bint Jahash. Alhamdulillah, sorry for that. So he got him married to Zainab bint Jahash, who was his cousin sister. But unfortunately, Zainab belonged to the elite class, more of a higher strata of the society, and Zaid, being a slave who was liberated, he could never, I mean, reach the same. I would say there was, he could not strike that chord which is needed for the relationship to prosper. And after trying very hard, he actually divorced her. So this is
और
true.
और जो दूसरी वाली है कि वो उन्होंने
And
कहा
yes,
मुझे
this
वैसे
is, the
नहीं
second
पसंद।
also is true, that the lady herself was very beautiful, it is said, and she was very graceful and elegant, and her husband was not, I mean, he was not that in that league in any circumstances, in any way. And she said that she might get into some trial because of the fact that she might be, she might be led away with and go away with some other person simply because she does not like her husband of his looks. So the
और
Prophet said that, well, if it is such a big trial for you and you'd like to separate from your husband, that is fine.
और ये डॉक्टर साहब, ये जो हजरत खतीजा थी उन्होंने हजूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को प्रपोज किया था?
Yes, that is what is generally known.
That's correct, or it's not
I mean, we've not
100%?
fully researched this because you see, a lot of things regarding the part of the Prophet's life before his prophethood is not fully known.
Okay.
So there is a lot of debate. So the common notion is that she was 40 years old and he was 25 years old, and there is a difference of 15 years between their marriage. Now this has been brought into a lot of discussion and criticism, and people think that this could not have been possible. And again, the other thing that is known is that she proposed him because she actually asked him to transport her merchandise and do business on her behalf. And when she saw that she had seen a very honest man, and that led her to propose. I mean, it's something which is very likely. And remember, in the Arab society, it was something that was a norm. Either the wife could propose, either the woman could propose or the man could propose. It's not something of something of a strange thing or an alien thing. It might be something of a strange matter regarding our Indian society, but the Arabs were very open to one another. So it is quite likely if that happened.
तो यानी ये कहना is kind of okay कि rights are there for women if they like or dislike or if they want to stay in the marriage or
Oh
not.
yes, absolutely.
लेकिन ये हमारी अपनी society है जो दक्यानूसी है.
You see, this is everywhere. At times, the society is the biggest hurdle, not only in continuing the marriage, but also in dissolving it. And that is where we have to understand that there are a lot of clashes that occur at times. They don't relate to the husband and wife in any sense. It's basically the families that at times create these hurdles, as a result of which the marriage has to stand dissolved. So it is these customs that we have to work on. We must create a society in which marriage becomes easy. It is not dependent on so many elaborate customs that it makes almost impossible for girls at their proper age to get married, simply because the dower is not available, or simply because there are other situations that have arisen, or because of these things that we relate to our brotherhood, in which we don't marry outside our caste. So this is still a taboo or a stigma in many societies, in which they don't allow girls to get married outside of their family to some other caste, because they would think that their property is going to be divided and all sorts of people are going to become part of the family. So these are taboos, I would say, and these are cultural superstitions that have to be reformed. And this can only take place if we get that education, and not just education, but this instruction that this is now how we should prosper in lives.
Jazakallah.
I have a question, Dr. Saleem, regarding this. Of course, I think this is a discussion that I think everybody wants to have. Okay, so if a second marriage is taking place abroad in a non-Muslim country, then what is the correct way to marry? Most people just do a nikah but don't believe this is considered good Islamic cultural practice. So does one legally marry a second wife? How does
So
one
first of
marry
all,
a second wife?
first of all, you have to understand that when you are living in a country, you must honor the laws of that country. So, for example, when you are living in the United States, you're living in the UK, you're living in Australia, you're living in Canada. I mean, many countries, they don't allow a second marriage. For them, it's a monogamous society. So what Muslims generally do is that they don't declare their second wife in the law, which is absolutely incorrect. If you're living in a country in which this is not allowed by law, remember, marrying the second time is not an obligation. So you have to honor that law. And I see so many people not understanding this, and they break the law and they deprive that wife of the status of a wife, because you see, in the eyes of the law, she's not your wife. And if something happens like issues of inheritance or other rights which a woman has, she will never have that legal right, because in that country that you're living in, you have not declared her as your wife. So I think this is something of a practice that must be gotten rid of. It is absolutely against the law and against the spirit of religion as well.
Okay. Anybody has any other questions regarding this passage? Okay. So, Dr. Saleem, I just want to ask, I know we're beating about the same question, again and again, but it seems that if a wife says that I am leaving, at the end of the day, she's doing it because a decision was made by somebody else. She may have wanted to stay in the marriage, but now the second wife is there, and the first wife decides to leave. It seems that God has given a provision. It almost seems if there's an allowance to men. A woman doesn't really have a choice then. If she wants to walk out, yes, she's given that choice, but it's kind of seems a
he
little
has a
unfair.
choice, because you see that if he thinks that her husband is doing something bad, forget about the second marriage. Let's see if he's a person who's become dishonest, or he's doing something which is against the wishes of the wife. It amounts to the same thing. It's just a question of looking at things in a particular way. Whatever the husband is doing is not pleasing to the wife, whether it's the second marriage, whether it's the nature of his job, whether he's being transferred to a different city and does not want to take the family there. So there could be a number of scenarios. We just cannot highlight one scenario of marrying a second time. There are so many things which a husband can do which the wife cannot like or does not like. And if he insists on doing that, I mean, either she will say yes, okay, I'm going to compromise, or she can just walk away. And exactly the same thing for the husband as well. If he thinks that the wife is doing something and he would not like her to do that thing, of course he'll try to convince her wife not to do that. But what if she insists, and the husband thinks that he has no other way out but to get separated? Then he'll do the same thing as well. So you see, we cannot just highlight one situation. There could be a number of scenarios, a number of them, which either the wife insists or the husband insists on doing. What then? I mean, the best would be that they strike a compromise, especially if there are children who are born, because they are to suffer the most. But let's say that everything has been done and dusted and nothing still budges and the things stand as they were or are, and the husband or the wife still insists that, well, he or she would like to have his or her own way. Then, I mean, there's no other way out. So I think we have to understand that the choices are on both ends and they are regarding every single decision of the other spouse.
Right. Okay. Shabnam, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
थैंक यू सर देखिए आप ये कह रहे हैं कि both have choice अब अगर husband marries for the second time or first wife cannot tolerate and she decides to walk away, sir, who is going to provide for her? Then she is going to be responsible for herself. चलें kids का हम कह दें कि
You see, as I said, this is not just the case with the second marriage. What if he decides to do a job and he shifts to a different city
sir
and he cannot take the wife along with her, and the wife says that I must go along with you? You see,
sir
you
आप
have to
generalize
understand. Yes, go ahead.
प्लीज जनरलाइज नहीं करें क्वेश्चन को यहीं तक
See,
रखें
what I'm saying is that this is a matter of generalization. You see, what we are doing is that we are concentrating on just one issue. What I'm saying or
Right.
trying to say is that, you see, anything can happen. Any decision of a spouse can negatively affect the other spouse. Second marriage is
Right.
one such decision. One such decision. It could be a number of other decisions. So, if
so
the same thing is happening to the wife, the husband will try to convince her, or he'll just walk out from the marriage. In this situation, if the husband insists on something, the wife will try to convince him not to do it. But if he insists, then the choice that she has, as he would have, is either compromise or walk away. You see, these are equal choices that both have.
सर चलें ठीक है इट्स ओके थैंक
Yes. Yeah. I think the confusion. Yeah, I think the question constantly keeps arising because I feel women have not been given that allowance, Dr. Saleem. It almost seems that women can make that choice out of a reaction, but men have still been allowed to marry multiple times. If it seems, I
Okay,
understand.
let me also clarify this. I mean, it's not a question of men having the right to marry more than one wife. It's the question of the head of the family having the choice to marry more than one wife. Let me put it this way: if women were the head of the family, let's say, and they can, in certain situations, can still become heads of families because of a number of exceptions that might arise, then in that case, they will be given the right to marry four husbands because now they are the head of the family. So the argument against the fact that you cannot have more than one wife or more than one husband is not because of any gender selection or the superiority of the husband. It is because anyone who is to be regarded as the head of the family has been given this right. Now, if that right is given to the person who is not the head of the family, then that would mean that simultaneously he or she is subjected to a head of the family, which is more than one. So that is something that is to be avoided. So what I'm saying is that if that is the case, that for example, women were to be regarded as the head of the family and they were providing for their husbands and doing all the things that husbands are required to do, and as a result being invested with the status of the head of the family, then she would have the same right as the husband has. She would be allowed to marry four husbands. So you see, it's not gender specific. It's not that the husband is allowed or not that the wife is allowed. It is whoever is the head of the family, he has been given this allowance.
Okay, Dr. Saleem. Shabnam has her hand raised again. Go ahead, Shabnam. Ask your question.
थैंक यू सो मच सर बस छोटा सा मैं बात आपसे क्लैरिफिकेशन चाह रही थी सर इसके ऊपर गामिदी साहब का तो ये स्टैंस है कि अल्लाह ताला ने जो नेचुरली जो रिक्वायरमेंट रखी है या जो पेयर्स बनाए हैं उसमें 1:1 ही है हजरत आदम के साथ सिर्फ एक अम्मा हवा की
Correct.
गई
Right.
और
Correct.
इसी तरह प्रॉफिट
So that is absolutely right. I mean, that is what I also say.
Right.
I mean, a natural family or a
Right.
normal family would come into being through the union of one husband and one wife. So this is what a normalcy is. But you see, at times, I mean, you don't have multiple marriages all the time. It's not that every single husband or wife is going to marry more than once. How many instances are there in this world even today? Maybe 1%. So you see, this is not a norm. It's like an exception.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I am opening the forum. It's open question time now. So anybody, if you have any questions, if it's not regarding the passage, you can first, of course, ask regarding the passage, and then we'll just move on to an open forum. Please raise your
Assalamu alaikum,
hands.
Dr.
I don't see
Salim.
any raised hands right now. If you want to ask your, okay, it's Shabnam again. Okay, Mohammed Qasim, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Uh, the non-off-topic question started, right?
Yes, you can ask.
Okay. So this question is about the theoretical discussion we were having yesterday about the conditions under which a woman will be allowed to marry more than one man. In that case, if a woman is pregnant from a husband, then she will not be available for other husbands and cannot have child with them. But if she is
Yes.
but if she is having a child with a husband by lawful surrogacy, then she will be available for other husbands and can also have child with them again by lawful surrogacy. So
Correct.
theoretically asking, is it possible for a woman to marry more than one man without the help of lawful surrogacy? Thank you, sir.
Without the help of local surrogacy, how would that be possible? Because local surrogacy gives the option that the child, once it fertilizes, will be transferred to the womb of a third person, which is the mother, so that the wife will now be available for the other husbands. That's only possible if the fetus is taken out from her and transferred to a surrogate mother. If that is not done, then I mean she has to maintain the status of the child as a child of the husband, and obviously she can still be available because we would still be knowing that who the child belongs to. But you see, this could be a matter of, I mean, it's not always a matter of legality that is under question. It's also a matter of perception, because one particular husband is maintaining the wife. He knows that the wife needs a doctor. She needs proper care, and if she's available to other husbands, then some precaution might be thrown to the wind. Something might happen to the child, and she might not be treated properly. So you see, this is also a very important thing. So once she gets pregnant from one husband, then it is in the fitness of things that she should not be available to the rest of the husbands, unless, of course, she transfers the fetus to a surrogate mother.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
All right.
Saleem.
Thank you, sir.
Imran, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you very much for clarification. I just one comment, and then I have a question which is not on the topic. The clarification or the stance historically, Muslims, because of the head of the family, the men were responsible for marrying the women, and in Medina there were a lot of women, that either were divorced or their husband died in wars and stuff. So they made sure that every woman got married and they were taken care of by the men totally. Of course, in our culture, it's a lot of nobody wants to marry divorced females, which is not Islamic, and nobody wants to help them. And many times, divorced females are left with their parents, and nobody helps them. So our culture is very different, and I agree with our sisters who have mentioned it. And a lot of it is influenced by the Indian culture also. So there are, it's not always that the men should be marrying new wives or young women. It's about responsibility and being the head of the family. So many times, the men have double responsibility now when they get married, and like you mentioned, it's not the natural stance. You can just have one-to-one. That's a normal situation. Now, off-topic question that I have is about Ramadan. Like when old people who are unable to fast or people who are sick, they can give fidya if there is no chance of them getting better, right? So they can give fidya for each fast they miss. But what about them missing salah? Like when they're missing prayers. Unlike Hajj, there are people who go and they can do Hajj on behalf of their parents, but I never heard somebody praying or fasting on your behalf. So what happens when you miss so many prayers and stuff, and why is that you're able to do Hajj on other people's behalf or Umrah? Thank you.
So I think that we have to understand that primarily all worship rituals are meant for the person himself under question. So whether it is the fast, whether it's the prayer, whether it's the Hajj or any other ritual, it's primarily meant for the person himself who is bound by law and by religion to carry them out. Why? Because all these rituals are meant to purify him. So basically, it is his responsibility, and he cannot shift his responsibility to other people. In case of the fast, I mean, this is like a very genuine, I would say, pretext that if he gets sick or he is old in age, or there could be other reasons that if he is not able to fast, then at least by making someone else fast, he is sort of participating in the month of Ramadan. So it's like more of an emotional input for him, an emotional, I would say, bolsterment for him. And so that is why it has been allowed. Otherwise, of course, it was sufficient that if he cannot fast, then it's simply like that, he cannot fast. But because of the fact that these fasts are, I mean, just 30 out of 360 days, and they are quite numbered, so in order for that person to make stake a claim in the reward of Ramadan, he has been given this chance. And as far as all other rituals are concerned, I mean, for example, I mean, look at the salat, which is the namaz or the prayer. Because of the fact it's, I mean, 5 times a day, and if you count the number of prayers that might accumulate, so there's no question of a person offering in lieu of your own self, because obviously this is something that you are required to do. In the case of the fast, if you are not able to fast, you are trying to make other people fast. So you are participating yourself. Similarly, in the case of the prayer, if you're not able to pray, then no one else is going to pray on your behalf, because, I mean, that is something that does not make you going to pray, because now either you've passed away, excuse me. In that case, you are asking your children to pray on your behalf, or maybe you are sick and you cannot pray. But if you look at the circumstances in which a person can pray, you'll find that until and unless he gets unconscious, there are all other ways in which he can still pray, even by gestures. So even in that, participation is essential. Now we come to the Hajj. So I think this is something again that we have to understand, that as far as Hajj is concerned, once a person has the strong intention to offer Hajj and he or she is not able to do so because of any circumstances, it could be illness, it could be lack of resources, it could be an opportunity, or whatever is hindering that Hajj to be offered, then the person is going to get the reward of his intention. So if the children are going to still go ahead and do it on their behalf, it's more of a psychological thing that they might be doing. Otherwise, for all intents and purposes, if they don't do it, the person who has missed that Hajj or Umrah is going to get the reward of his intention.
I see. For the fasting, when we pay the fidya, let's say if we're not able to do the qada and whatnot, so we can't make up the fast, but we're paying the fidya. Is that fidya supposed to be paid to the one who's fasting, right, to help them break the fast, not to anybody, just right? Yeah.
I mean, fidya is basically an expiation. It's something that you give in lieu of not being able to do so. So either you can make some other person fast, or you can give that money in charity for any other cause.
So how can you make someone fast? Like if someone is already doing their fast, you can help them break the fast.
It actually means, yes, it actually means that he cannot afford to take, for example, the sehri or the suhoor or the iftar meals. So you're not going to pay or maybe provide them the suhoor or the iftar meal. So either you can do that, or you can spend the money in charity, equal amount.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. AJ, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. मेरा सवाल बनी इसराइल के बारे में है. It's quite possible कि इस सवाल का जवाब नहीं हो दुनिया में, but अगर नहीं हो तो आप बता दीजिएगा, no problem. The question is कि जिस कौम पे मनोसलवा नाजिल होता था, तो मतलब वो कौम उस जमाने में ज्यूस थे, वो यहूदी थे, और तो वो कौम मनोसलवा और इसके अलावा और भी बहुत चीजें उन पे नाजिल हुई थी, तो उसके बाद वो मुसलमान हो गए थे या वो यहूदी रहे, जो कि अब यहूदी, ज्यूज और ज़ायनिस्ट की शक्ल में हैं, या वो लोग मुसलमान हो गए थे और अब वो पैलेस्टीनियन अरब्स हैं जो कि बहुत ज्यादा आजमाइश में हैं? And that's all.
So they were both of these sorts. I mean, some of them, they accepted faith, they became followers of, the next prophet. And when the next prophet came, of course, that was Jesus, they became followers of Jesus. And when the prophet which followed Jesus was Muhammad, when he came, they became Muslims. So there's one line of people who followed God's commandments all the way. They were followers of Moses, and when Jesus came, they became his followers, and ultimately, when Muhammad, peace be upon him, came, they became his followers, or they belonged to the same lineage, the same people. And there were others who did not do so. Others, there were people who did not accept Jesus. For example, the Jews of today, they don't accept Jesus. They call him to be they don't accept him as a prophet at least, and they don't accept Muhammad as a prophet also. So the Jews of today, they don't accept them as a prophet. At least they don't accept them as a prophet of God, in the sense that he is the real Messiah. So they don't accept Jesus to be the Messiah, and they don't accept Muhammad to be the prophet of God, in the sense that they are bound to obey him. Similarly, the Christians of today, their stance here is that they are followers of Jesus, and as far as Muhammad is concerned, he is a prophet of God, but they are not bound to follow him, and only Muslims are bound to follow him. So these are the various stances that have resulted of not following all the prophets. But as your question is that what became of both of them, I have just answered by saying that they were both these types of people. Some of them, they followed all the prophets and ultimately ended up following Muhammad, and there were others who either stopped at Moses or at Jesus and did not go further.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
you.
for that. Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Imran, did you have another question? I think I saw your raised hand.
Yeah. Sorry, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
It was about where is it in the Quran where it says that after Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that there's not going to the adab on the or the people, like where they will be completely eliminated, like the previous we know in the Quran, when they disobeyed and disbelieved in Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, they were completely eliminated. But we have seen
This is
after Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, like the
at
Jews
the
have
end of Surah
constantly.
Muhammad. If you read Surah Muhammad, the last part of it, it will
Okay.
say that if you don't obey God, then God is going to take you away and bring another set of people in your place.
But what
If you look
about
at the
like after Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is it that the Prophet Allah Subhanahu wa Taala said that He's not going to punish people after the last messenger?
No, I mean, what is being said here is being said to the Sahaba. And of course, the weak among the followers of the Prophet at that time, especially those who belong to the Munafiqun, and they are being told that if you don't honor your own Prophet, then don't think that God is dependent on you. He might take you away and replace you with others. You're not indispensable.
We read that today also, right? You're right. So, but like there are people who disbelieved and were oppressors, and they were completely eliminated, we see. But like we don't see that happen to the Jews after Prophet ﷺ. Like they have done it repeatedly. Even before Prophet ﷺ came, they have disobeyed, and they have lost at times their temples twice already, but they're still now in power. So what is the wisdom that
You
we
see,
understand?
for them, the Quran has told us that the generation who denied Jesus was destroyed by Titus in his attack. And there's another law for the Israelites, and that is that if they don't accept the new prophets, and if they continue with their ways, and as they have done so, then they will always remain subservient to other nations of the world, and they'll be exiled from one place to another until the day of judgment. This has been mentioned in the Quran as their punishment, and that is what's happening to the Israelites. So this is just a temporary relief that you may find
Right.
if they are having a place to live in Israel. In the case of nations of the world, 50 or 60 or 70 years is a very small period of time. So they are bound to be displaced from here once again, and they'll have to go to some other place in exile and then form some place of living and once again be kicked out from that place. So this is something which God has said, that for them is the punishment of exile. So they will be exiled from one place, then they're going to gather at some other place, and they will think that they have found their homeland. Once again, they'll be exiled from that place, and this is going to continue till the day of judgment. That is what the Quran says. Because this is their punishment, because for 2,000 years, prophets were sent to them. They were given this opportunity to become leaders of mankind, and this special status of the progeny of Abraham, which they are enjoying is something which is going to also work counterproductively if they don't obey the laws.
See, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. I have just one more raised hand, but I will come back to you next Sunday. We're all out of time. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem, for a wonderful session and everybody for participating. Inshallah, see you all of you next Sunday.